What are teams doing?
Let us begin with starting talking about who's going to win the AFC South. And the Colts did really well last season. And then there's the Jags. They're always, in the conversation, we are hoping that they, are in the conversation. And then there's the Titans, and so who is going to be the team that comes on top in the AFC South? I expect that the Colts are, it's easy to say that the Colts are going to go, back to back, AFC South championships. And I do believe that they're going to make the playoffs this season. But I'm going to actually go with the Jaguars here. Because on paper, they should be a team that, like on paper, they should be a team that, that claims the AFC South title. And so they have to stay healthy, though. And that's obviously for any team, because injuries are going to be a problem for, like it's just inevitable for any team. Like injuries do happen. So, but what I'm getting at here is if the Jaguars, can stay healthy, because you look at their roster on paper, if they stay healthy, they're not just going to the playoffs, they win their division, and they not just going to the playoffs as a wild card team is what I meant to say, but they're, a team that wins their division. And that's where I have them. Because, the Colts, when I look at the Colts, yeah, they won their division last season, but and every team has updated. And the Colts definitely, they did lose a receiver. Obviously, they gained, other pieces in the offseason. Every team has. But when you look at the Colts, there's nothing really that excites me. And I'm not talking about because of the quarterback that they have. I believe that he is a good quarterback. I believe that the quarterback that they have is actually, actually good, better than what the analysts mark him up to be. I think he didn't really fit in too well in the Giants system, and I think we are seeing where he went from kind of like not really fitting into the Giants system to, fitting in with the Colts. And I just think that's what you're seeing there. And I think he's going to repeat, have another, good year. But I don't see the Colts winning their division. I see the Colts getting into the playoffs, but as a, wild card team, where I see the Jacksonville Jaguars, they went out and they got pieces that they were missing last season, and they're going to, get a playoff spot. And so that's what I see from now the Dolphins. I see the Dolphins, they're probably, the Dolphins, I would say they're going to be last place in that division. And the Colts, second, and as a wild card team. So a question that I keep on asking myself in my mind, like, what are the Packers going to be like from here on out? Like, is the reign over for the Packers, and who owns the NFC North? Like, meaning, is it the Bears that own the Packers now, or is it the Packers going back to owning Chicago? That's kind of what I mean by, that question. And, there was something on the, the NFL Network this morning that they were talking about the Packers, and they still believe in the Packers. And I remember saying, let's look at the evidence. The evidence last season does not match what they were saying this morning on how the Packers are still the Packers, and how they're gonna, continue to, figure things out and get back on. Like, you look at last season, I believe the Packers won, one game against, Chicago, maybe, if I'm remembering right. But the Bears beat them in the playoffs, and I do believe that the Bears beat them once last in a regular season game. But, the question remains, however, for some people, not for me, but for some people, the question still remains on, are the Bears truly owning Green Bay now? And I am going to answer that question with a yes. You gotta look at the evidence. I know there's going to be some people, that are going to be, well, you're a Bears fan, and yada, yada, yada. But, like, no. I'm not giving the Bears the benefit of the doubt just because I'm a fan. For many years, Green Bay has been on top, and for many years, if you know me, you would know that I've always put Green Bay in front of Chicago, knowing that Chicago really wasn't a good team. I'm not a Chicago Bears fan that said, well, this could be the year. Like, no, I've always known that it just wasn't. This, last year, told me something different. And that's what I'm talking about, is, going back to last season. Last season told me something different, that this is a new era. in the NFC. Well, for many divisions, this is a new era for many divisions, not just the NFC North, but definitely for the NFC North. This is a completely new era. And we're gonna have to get used to teams that used to be owned by certain teams. We're gonna have to get used to them now owning those teams that used to. Now, not every team for every division, but for certain teams. Um, you know, because it's definitely for Chicago. Because I've seen last season, told me something different. Now for the Chargers, things are still the same. There's still a team that owns them in that division. Like, they haven't shown me anything different. That's why I can't say for the Chargers, there's a new era for the Chargers. I can't say that about the Chargers because I haven't seen it. I'm a person that looks to the evidence, and the evidence does not point to a new era for the Chargers, right? Like, it points to a new era for the Denver Broncos in that division, but not for the Chargers. Or at least not yet. At least not yet. There's a new era in Chicago because you can clearly see it, from last season, and Green Bay they don't have that same spark, that same spunk, that oh yeah, we own the NFC North, and they just don't have that anymore. And Love is a good quarterback, and in fact he's probably one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC North. But it's just, there's not that, with Aaron Rodgers, there was no doubt in your mind that he was going to bring Green Bay, each and every season to winning their division. And then the same thing with Brett Favre. It just doesn't have that same feel. If you're watching and you analyze the game like I do, it does not have the same feel. And I'm just being completely honest. And I will say this. I was never really a fan of Kalen Williams when he came in. Last season told me something, that there's something special about Kellen Williams, and that I was wrong the first two seasons that he played for the Bears. Last season he told me that I was wrong to doubt him. And so I just go where the evidence is, and so there's a new era in the NFC North, and I'm going to leave it at that. I need to stop this program for just a few moments of your time. I want to say, pray for sports, especially if you watch football. Pray for the NFL. We know that, well, in pro sports alone, they're always after the money, but in the NFL alone, it's become popular among the athletes in each you know, in each spot, like at it, like each position, to want to be the highest paid in that position. Well, we need to pray for that. We need to pray that the athletes would humble themselves. There is a spirit that calls itself mammon, if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't really know, but it's a spirit that, it's a spirit of, it's a financial spirit. It's a financial blessing spirit that, promises, finances, promises, all these, wealth, good fortune, and everything else like that. And then there's also, we see this greed, where every player wants to be the highest paid. Every, especially in the NFL, every player of, certain, it's just a common thing right now, where, at every position, is a common thing that they want to be the highest paid player at that position. And, one, that is greed, and then two, it's a spirit inside professional sports that is giving, athletes, promising athletes good fortune. And it's really ugly. It's an ugly spirit. It actually, it does more, it actually does more damage than it does good. On the outward appearance, it looks like everything's fine, everything's great, but on the inside, it chokes the life out of people who have that spirit. And so we just need to pray that they would humble themselves, and, pray that, that God will send his angels to get greed out, get the spirit of mammon out, and help them to realize that they don't need to be making all of this money. They would be fine making what the average citizen makes. I mean, I know the average citizen, there's a little bit of a struggle, but the average citizen here in America, makes a lot more than the rest of the world. Like, it's fine. It's not going to harm them in any way. They're still going to be able to pay the bills and provide for their family. If average citizens, whatever they make, can still provide for their families, so can athletes. Athletes can be paid the same and still provide for their families. So we just, it's deception is what it is. It's getting you to think that you always need more, when the truth in reality is you don't need more money.
Fantasy football.
So in fantasy football, we're going to break down some players who I expect are going to kind of, have a breakout season, or either like a breakout season, or kind of, they're going to be expected to, do better, than the previous years. And then also we're going to, kind of talk about Mahomes. And actually, I want to start out with talking about Mahomes, because Mahomes, he's coming back from injuries. And I did some research, and I'm not going to, for time's sake, I'm not going to really get into a whole lot of the research that I did. But I found that quarterbacks that use their legs and these are not pocket quarterbacks, because pocket quarterbacks that come back from the same injury, we find that they come back from the injury and they do fairly well. The research that I have done shows that quarterbacks that rely on their legs, that do not throw from the pocket, they tend to struggle when they come back. They tend to struggle with accuracy when they come back, and completion percentage, and all of that. That just it believe me. So I do not expect Patrick Mahomes. Stay away from Patrick Mahomes. I know analysts are excited. They are getting excited. They're saying that he looks fine, yada yada yada. Go where the research, go where the evidence points you. The evidence points to quarterbacks that escape the pocket, that don't throw from the pocket, struggle after coming back from these injuries. So don't draft Patrick Mahomes this season. And so let's talk about DJ Moore. DJ Moore, he went to the Bears, and then he went to and in 2022 he ranked 23rd. He finished 23rd with 118 targets and 28.9% shares. But then, like his time in Chicago, his shares went down, but and his points, his overall points went down. Well, now he's on the Bills, and I look for the highest that he has ever scored in fantasy is 286 points, and I expect that DJ Moore on the Bills is going to go back to 200, around 280 points, to maybe even really close to 300 points, and possibly somewhere in the top 10 rankings for finishing in fantasy football. That's what I expect, from doing the research from previous years, and just looking at stats and everything, and all the teams that he has played with, and that's what I can expect from DJ Moore. But is it necessarily going to be like top 5? I really don't know. I wouldn't put him in the top 5, but I do believe that it could be top 10, possibly, definitely somewhere in the higher top 15. But it could be possible that he could reach the top 10. Now, AJ Brown, let's look at the 2 years that he was in Philadelphia before Saquon Barkley. He finished 6th and 5th. There was one year where he had 299 points, and the other year he had 289 points without Saquon Barkley. And so he gets drafted to the Titans, and what I'm noticing here is, without Saquon Barkley, and going to a team with a better quarterback, and a team that went to targeted him more, because you have 1 year 28.9 shares without Saquon and 30.4% shares without Saquon, where in Tennessee it was less. You know, him, it just, his, receiving points in targets and all that just skyrocketed. And I expect the same thing again is going to happen, because not only is he going to a team with a better quarterback, but we can also, for time's sake, I just don't have the time, but you can also compare Henderson to Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley is a better running back. The Philadelphia Eagles ran the ball more with Saquon Barkley. The Patriots, they don't run the ball as much as the Eagles, and Henderson is not on the same level as Saquon Barkley. So I do expect that not only do I expect, and then also the quarterback is better. So not only do I expect Brown to get back to the 2 years that he was with the Eagles before Saquon, with like 299 points and 289, but to go above that. And then for the receiver, a Doomsday, and for the tight end on the Bears, I expect them to go higher as well to get more fantasy points, because I've done research on this. However, I would rather draft their tight end than a Doomsday. Why? I think he's the tight end is probably gonna get more targets. Possibly. I still believe that they could possibly split, targets between the two, but we the outcome with a Doomsday there before DJ Moore got there, it tells a story there, and that's all I'm saying. So I would still draft a Doomsday, but I would rather have the Bears tight end. But don't get me wrong, they're both going to be targeted more because DJ Moore is not there, but that's what I would expect. I just have to interrupt one more time to say, play football. Go out there and create a 9 versus 9 flag football league, or whatever you want to do, but go out there and play football. And I'm actually speaking to the adults here, because oftentimes, as adults, we want to say, well, going out there and just, playing, football, like, for fun or whatever, that seems, kind of a kiddish thing to do, or whatever excuse. I don't make the excuse that it's just for kids. Think about all the leagues, all the adult leagues out there. There's adult basketball leagues, there's adult softball leagues, and adult ultimate frisbee leagues. Well, if there's leagues for adults, you can create a adult league for flag football. 9-on, just do 9-on-9. It really, you can do 9 versus 9. I have made a playbook, literally, just for the fun of it. I have made a playbook, an offensive playbook for 9 versus 9, literally. Now, I done that for the fun of it, just for the heck of it. And if I did it, you can do it too. And I would encourage you to do that. Also encourage women to join you in playing 9 versus 9 flag football.
Bewley Unleashed.
The last and final thing that I want to talk about is protecting the players. Now, I've been around long enough to know that they say, and I know that the league is getting better, but they talk a lot about protecting the players. But the players that they protect the most is quarterbacks. And out of the quarterbacks, the NFL protects the most is the star quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that we all care about, like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and like all of those quarterbacks that we all care about. And there's other quarterbacks that don't really get the same protection. And before, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, how dare you speak on, the NFL that way? They're doing all that they can to protect the quarterbacks. No, they're not. I've been watching the league for 20 or more years. And I know that they are, because, go back to, the Brady era. Brady would hardly get hit, and they would, protect him, where there were other quarterbacks, not so, well known, and they did not get the same treatment. It has not changed. I mean, maybe they've gotten a little bit better, but it has not changed. Do not tell me that they're, we want to protect the player. No, you're only protecting the quarterbacks. And no, you're not protecting the quarterbacks. You're only protecting certain quarterbacks. And so, that's another thing that you can pray about, that the NFL would really truly, if they truly care about players, that they would, treat every player the same, treat every quarterback the same. Treat a backup player, a backup quarterback the same that you would for a starting quarterback, and including the same that you would for Josh Allen. If you're really serious about treating the quarterbacks the same, if a quarterback gets slammed to the turf or slammed to the ground, maybe it shouldn't matter what quarterback, gets slammed. Maybe every quarterback that gets slams to the dirt should go to that blue tent. And I can tell you, I've watched it long enough to know that there's some quarterbacks that every time that they get hit, it seems like they're going to that blue tent, where there are others that don't go to the blue tent every single. And believe me when I tell you that, because I have sat there and I have seen the NFL long enough to tell you the truth. I've seen many games in my time of watching the NFL. Don't play me for a fool. The cornerback for the Giants is completely 100% right. And he's right to say that there are quarterbacks that get treated differently. That it seems like every time that he gets hit, he gets put, like, and look, I like how the NFL is being careful not, they want to be careful, and when he gets hit, but it needs to be the same for a backup. It needs to be the same for backup, and it's clearly not. It's clearly not. And before you say, well, the NFL just wants to, yeah, that part is true, but not for every single it's not the same for every single quarterback, and it needs to. It needs to. So I will say this. He doesn't need to complain about how many times he goes to the blue tent. What I would rather hear him say is that if I get that treatment, I want to see, a backup get the same treatment.